Welcome back to Trench Talk for your weekly dose of underground heavy and metal music. I am, as always, your host, Flight of Icarus from metaltrenches.com. Please do visit the site, get on our mailing list, join us at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Vero, and of course check out our Patreon if you would like to financially support what we are trying to do here. We're going to try something a little bit different this time. I'm kind of toying around with different lengths of episodes, different formats, different ways of presenting information. So this time I'm going a little bit more scripted based off of my written reviews. So if some of these words sound familiar, it's because you may have read them on the site. And to be fair, I wrote those words, so I do not have qualms using them. I want to continue to kind of toy around with different ideas, so please do let me know what you think of this particular approach in the comments and on our social media. I've been meaning to actually shout out the Hudson Horror for providing our theme song. It's been in the description, but I just keep forgetting to mention that it is called What the Moon Brings. Unfortunately, this band is on indefinite hiatus, but some of the members are working on other projects, some of which we've shared and will be sharing more of in the future. Good friends with the vocalist over there, good guy. You can still also pick up their albums on Bandcamp, which I highly recommend, and a full version of this particular song is available on our first sampler. You can find those and download them at the price of your choosing at our Metal Trenches Bandcamp page. And you can also follow us there to see when we drop new ones. Get them for free, or it's another great way to make a one-time donation. You can also go to our store page on the website and pick up a PDF copy of the ABCs of Black Metal, which is a little kind of fun art project, tongue-in-cheek thing I did a couple years back. Super cheap. I think it's like $3 right now. It's a little mini ebook. It's kind of like A is for Abath and, that sort of thing, taking a little spoof on sort of children's books, but with kind of spooky, black and white, crudely drawn imagery. So a while back, I walked through my favorite 10 releases from the first half of 2018, and now we're going to talk about my favorite albums from July forwards. In the description, I have links to my full lists with streams. You'll find not only these 10, but also 10 for each of our rating scales, so that's 30 recommendations, plus another 30 if you check out the ones from the first half of the year. And that may seem like a lot, but considering I review 1 or 2 albums every weekday of the year, not to mention all of the shorthand post recommendations I make in our post section, it's hard to boil things down to just 10. Also, I apologize to Horrendous, who got bumped at the 0 hour by the new Death Karma album, which I'll be talking about more in a minute. You are still featured on the full list and very deserving of attention, and that was a very difficult decision to make. But in any case, these 10 albums I'm about to talk about are the ones that across all 3 of our rating scales, enjoyability, musicianship, innovation, really top things out across the board. They were experiences that were difficult to put down, and also brought in some new ideas and musicianship well above the rest. So let's get down to business, and in no particular order, I'm going to start with Exocrine with Molten Giant via Unique Leader Records. Exocrine is a French technical progressive death metal band. They are back with their incredible sophomore effort. I was already a big advocate for their previous album, which I felt was one of the most underrated albums of 2017, but Molten Giant is just as good, if not better, and more focused than its predecessor. And speaking of focus, Exocrine make the wise decision of prioritizing quality over quantity. At just 8 songs, clocking in at about 35 minutes, which is actually 5 minutes less than the debut, this album is lean and as consistent as they come. Compositions are incredibly complex and brimming with impressive technical performances, and never at the sacrifice of engagement and flow. Furthermore, each song has its own aesthetic and personality thanks to a highly varied approach to the riffs. I would recommend Exocrine to fans of Necrophagist, Within Destruction, Cynic, and beyond. Next up, we've got Death Karma, which I already kind of spoiled for you and just recently covered in another episode. Their new album is The History of Death and Burial Rituals Part 2, which is being distributed in part by Beyond Eyes Productions. Inspired by the literal death and burial rituals of cultures around the world, Infernal Vlad, also of underground cult black metal band Cult of Fire, returns with part 2 from his melodic black and death metal project, Death Karma. This is one of the most immersive albums of the year, thanks to ritualistic chanted vocals, infectiously expressive melodic guitar riffs, and a handful of regional instruments. It makes for an experience that truly feels like globe-spanning, morbid tourism. Vlad manages to capture the essence of each country with an inspiring level of respect and wonder. And as I stated in my full review, I feel like I learned more from listening to this album than in all of my sociology classes combined. I definitely turned to Google and Wikipedia a few times to learn about the topics on display, particularly a Hell's Angel burial that happened in New Zealand, as well as the concept of sky burial in Tibet. Overall, this is a stunning celebration of most people's greatest fear, death itself. I'd recommend Death Karma to fans of, again, Cult of Fire, Shamash, and Migla. Alright, near and dear to me because this was our topic of our first episode. We've got Moss Upon the Skull with In Vengeful Reverence through I Voidhanger. As I said in my very first episode, this album is exquisitely calculated progressive death metal. Every track is arranged and executed with needlepoint precision for those who enjoy their death metal with heavy emphasis on the prog like Obscura and Cynic. You're going to want to open your wallet for this one. My favorite parts are, unsurprisingly, the faster parts. The guitars and drums in these moments are dizzying in their technicality and shifting textures, but at the same time, I highly appreciate the pace changes. The deep, echoing, old-school death growls nicely complement the doomier sections, as on The Serpent's Scepter. And Moss Upon the Skull know exactly when to shift back up in gear again before you have a chance to ever get bored. Moss Upon the Skull will go great with things like Gorguts, Antlion, and Gorod. Alright, now we've got Vane with Error Zone through Closed Casket Activities. This is a Massachusetts metallic hardcore band dropping one of the harshest albums of the year. This album is intense and sure to be listed among the best hardcore outings of the year for sure. Vane are nothing short of obliteration personified. This is the sound of a mass extinction event. Taking cues from the likes of Code Orange and Knocked Loose, these guys bring steep competition to the game. Arizona is consistent as hell with 11 tracks that will knock your goddamn teeth out. Again, this is for fans of Code Orange, Jesus Peace, and Harm's Way. Alright, sticking with hardcore but taking it in a little bit of a different direction, we've got Frontierer with Unloved, which is an independent release. This is the latest slammer from metallic hardcore, mathcore, underground darlings Frontierer, based out of Scotland, UK. Unloved is a glorious downpour of industrialized hardcore noise and dizzying mathcore song structures. I said it sounds like someone uploaded Will Haven's Carpe Diem and it got all glitched out in the process. Lots of weird electronic elements breaking up the sounds, the syncopated vocals and djenty riffs hit like repeated strikes to the face from a lead pipe. And even without the physical concussion, I am sure feeling the same sense of disorientation. This is a truly dizzying experience. I can't recommend this enough to those who like their hardcore fast, violent, and with a heaping dose of aggressive electronic influences. Guitar tone is the stuff of android nightmares, and riffs sound more like video game laser blasts. If you enjoyed Sectioned earlier in the year, this is from the same musician. And then, of course, if you also enjoyed Vane and last year really dug the Car Bomb album, this is one for you. Switching gears back to a more black metal sound, we've got Imperial Triumphant with Vile Luxury through Gilead Media and Throat Ruiner Records. I easily would have made a full episode for this album if I had just started working on this podcast earlier in the year. Following up a detestably magnificent EP, New York contortionist black and death metal band Imperial Triumphant are back with a new full-length. Sonically, Imperial Triumphant have always been an abrasive, acquired taste, but for all of its obscenity and noise, Inceste, the previous EP, incorporated enough traditional songwriting elements to make it palatable. Vile Luxury scatters that to the wind. This album is largely pure experimental chaos. I hesitate to even call it controlled chaos. It really does pull off the whole mournful New York street sax player collapsing into hell aesthetic that it seems to be going for. lots of themes in terms of sort of the seedy underbelly of New York City, both celebrating its grandeur, but also pointing to its more decadent side. Definitely some of the most impressive drumming of the year as well. We actually did an interview with the drummer, which I will provide the link for below. If you're a fan of bands like Malthusian, Abyssal, and Portal, then you should definitely check this album out. It's a monster. Alright, another returning band here that we covered on a previous episode. Serox with the Phobos Demos Suite through Everlasting Spew. International brutal technical death metal band Serox seriously step up their game with a new concept album inspired by the likes of The Divine Comedy and A Christmas Carol. I was already impressed by Serox's pure brutality and technical instrumentation on tracks like Being and Nihilus, but it wasn't until Thanatophobia that they truly showed their cards. From this song forwards, the Phobos Demos Suite becomes a mind-melting work of progressive death metal madness. The guitars aren't only fast and methodical, they're infectiously unforgettable. The drums are not only pummeling, they're zombifyingly infectious. The vocals aren't only brutal, they're strangely catchy. With the perfect harnessing of both melody and sheer sonic violence, Serox have hit a serious high point in their career, and early on at that. If you enjoy First Fragment, Benighted, or Cryptopsy, then you need to get in here. Changing tone yet again, we have Psy with Heir to Despair via Candlelight Records. Always the cheeky experimental rabble-rousers, Japanese avant-garde black metal band Psy throw their fans yet another curveball with Heir to Despair. I absolutely loved Graveword, their previous album, but not content to rest on their laurels. With Heir to Despair, they provide a different direction entirely. Reportedly inspired by old crazy progressive bands like Brain Ticket, Embryo, Agitation Free, and more, the album shifts attention to psychedelic song structures, vintage keyboards, and flute, while also venturing into the stylistic influences of their eastern region. It's a grand collision of Japanese vocals with All-Nam Rude, laced with vocoder, sitar, and other regional instrumentation, mixed with more aggressive, thrashy material like Homo Homini Lupus and In Memorio Delusional. And just when you start to feel some familiar footing, Psy pulls out the rug once more with even further electronic madness. And thematically, this is all from the perspective of somebody spiraling into madness. All right, getting down to our last two here, we have A Forest of Stars with Grave Mounds and Grave Mistakes via Prophecy Productions. I mentioned these guys in a shout out, but I felt they deserve much more. Again, this is a band that I could have easily done a full episode, if not two, on. This is a UK avant-garde progressive black metal band, and they're time-traveling once more from the 1800s to take us on another incredible journey. Once again, I feel transported to another time and place. Somber, folky strings and a dramatic vocal delivery paints a portrait of early London with the devil lurking around every corner. According to the band, it is a struggle against insanity, one perfectly portrayed in atmospheric, elegant builds that make the world-burning eruptions of black metal all the more potent and destructive. Tribal drums, flutes, piano, and intriguing synths add an intense layer of texture and dynamics. Absolutely gorgeous and sometimes world-rending stuff. If you love groups like Isan, Shamash, and to an extent Moon Sorrow, then you will definitely want to hear the latest album from A Forest of Stars. Last but not least, this may come as no surprise if you've been following the podcast. This was our longest, or maybe second longest episode because I had so much to say about it. Daughters with You Won't Get What You Want through Ipecac Recordings. Avant-garde nightmares traversing post-hardcore, electronic, and industrial from Rhode Island's newly reunited Daughters. Tracks are at once deeply infectious and off-puttingly noisy. It's a work of intense imagery and Kubrickian levels of ambiguous existential dread. Clamorous riffs, prophetic vocals, and droning electronics all add up to Daughters dropping one of the best albums of the year, probably the best, and arguably the best of their career, although I've been in a few arguments with people on this because the opinions of longtime fans seems to be a little bit split. But the fact of the matter is I could not put this record down for weeks and have come back to it many times since. Be sure to check out episode 3 of this podcast to hear more on this one. Definitely my favorite episode that I've recorded to date, and sonically, if you're into stuff like These Arms Are Snakes, Ken Mode, and Jesus Lizard with some 9 Inch Nails kind of thrown in there to boot, then this is an album that you will not want to miss, and it will destroy your brain. Don't tell me how to do my job. You carry on like a son of a bitch. They got an name for people like you. I didn't take the time to write it down, though. You had a lot of fun playing crab ass with the boys. Which ones will you at home? Which ones will walk you to the door? Wonder which one's gonna call? Maybe the sun waits for you to be shown what to do. So that is my top 10 albums from the second half of 2018. Be sure to check out the full albums if they interested you. Most of the reviews have streams attached, as do the full-length written lists that I described earlier. And be sure to also buy them or add them to your Christmas list, because that makes everything. You know, if a band doesn't sell, they don't stick around, you don't hear more from them, they don't get to grow and develop. So again, check out those links in the description. As always, like, subscribe, comment, and give us a rating, especially if you're on iTunes. The more listeners, the more these bands can get their names out there and make some well-deserved sales. As always, thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.